everyone. I'm Jason Galka. Thank you so much for joining me again. It is Saturday, June 27th, 2015. And normally I don't bring up what day it is as we film, but this is Pride Month. It is June. Pride NYC is happening this weekend, and a major breakthrough has happened for the LGBT community. Yesterday, Friday the 26th, marriage equality has been spread across the United States. And joining me today is a very special guest, Josh Sabarra, author of his own memoir, Porn Again, who is joining me today. Great to see you,
You
honey.
too. I'm
How
happy
are
to
you?
be here. Good.
I'm so thrilled that you're here.
Thank
First of
you.
all, let's talk about what happened yesterday. Marriage equality for all. As
Yeah,
a
it's pretty
team player
monumental.
here,
Yes.
how are you feeling about that?
I feel great about it. I mean, the only thing that's fascinating to me is that, it's weird to be celebrating the fact that now we're equal.
Yeah.
It feels like a throwback to, you think that our country would have moved beyond that years and years ago. So, it's thrilling and it's exciting and,
Yes.
obviously something to celebrate. But
Mhm.
in a way, it's sort of sad to me that, you know, it's something that we even have to discuss,
Right. Right.
or that even had to go that far.
Exactly, but it is a major breakthrough,
Of
and I feel like
course.
more is going to come. There is more to come. As far as equality goes, and
Absolutely.
it's just major because there are so many of us that we do have a significant other that we do want to spend the rest of our lives with, and it's important that people understand that whatever you are, everybody deserves love is love.
Right.
Everybody deserves
And,
happiness.
the generation, the younger generations now that will know only the fact that and they can marry whomever it is that they love.
Right.
That's the part that's great to me, is that hopefully it's going to wipe out some of the antiquated thinking,
Hmm.
in different parts of the country, and the kids now who are growing up will know only the fact that
Yeah.
you know love is the same regardless of whether you have a male partner, female partner, or
Exactly.
whatever you'd like to marry.
Well, happy Pride to you this
Thank you,
weekend,
and
my
you
dear.
too.
You're here signing books all
Yes.
weekend long. Your
Yes.
memoir, Porn Again. I absolutely love it. And
Thank you.
don't be deceived by the title. It's actually not about porn per
Per
se,
se,
although in
right.
some of those chapters.
Yes, it's a little racy in parts, but no, porn, it's funny. The first thing people, when they hear the title, they'll say, "Were you a porn star?" And, I wish I had the body, and the physique to say yes. Um, but porn played a very important role in my evolution, and my coming out story. And so porn is a running theme in the book,
Mhm.
but not in the way people would think.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, it is kind of like it's about your journey overall.
Yes.
Let's get that out there. And it's kind of like a Hollywood wild ride of
Mm-hmm.
your journey of growing up, coming out, and discovering who you truly are at 40 years old.
Right.
Which, by the way, you look fabulous.
Thank
You
you.
look amazing.
I like to say it's about growing up, coming of age, coming out, and coming.
The most important one, save the
Exactly.
best for last.
Exactly.
So take me back a little bit. When you were younger, those of us that are gay or lesbian or transgender knew from a very young age that there was something different about
Right.
ourselves. We didn't fully understand what gay even was. At
Right.
least I didn't. What was it like for you?
Well, I recognize the difference. I would say around the age of 5. Uh, you sort of realize that there's sort of this fiber of awareness that goes through you that says, there's something that, I would see a little boy and get a certain feeling.
Hmm.
I couldn't articulate what it was, and in my mind, you're not sexualized at that age, so I didn't really understand what it meant, but I knew that there was something non-traditional about this feeling, and I also knew, I was severely bullied from a very early age, so when you're being made fun of for a physical attribute, if you're being made fun of because you're a redhead or because you're overweight or because you have freckles or because you have red hair, whatever it is that kids taunt you about, those physical attributes you can sort of put a you understand what it is that somebody's making fun of you
Yeah.
for. You can look in the mirror and see that physical attribute. When it has to do with something that's inside you, emotional, sexual, whatever it is, I think it's even harder for a kid to process why you're being bullied. Like, people are making fun of me, and it has to be because of this feeling that I have inside me that's different, and I don't know what that is, but whatever it is, it's bad. because
Right.
people are making fun of
So
it.
that's why you were being made fun of the
Yeah.
way you were presenting yourself?
Yes. Well, the first time that I was it was somebody who called me a homo, but in a very derogatory way. Was I want to say I was 6 or 7, and my parents had sent us to a day camp, every summer, and it was interesting because my parents were on the board of the camp. Of course, they had no idea that this was going on because I didn't tell them.
Mm.
And there was a counselor who I usually respond to girls, but I had this one little boyfriend when I was in camp, and we were getting on the bus together, and some people were getting in between us, and I put my hands on his shoulders to not lose him, and the counselor said, "What are you, a homo? Get your hands off of him." And of course, I
Wow.
had no idea what that even meant.
Yeah. I mean, how old were you when that happened?
6.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, we don't even know. I mean, I can vouch that back then I knew there was something different about me, but we didn't know what
Well, I
gay
did
or.
too, but I didn't know what it was. And
Right.
then, sort of in a 6-year-old's mind, I went home and replayed the entire day in my head. What does the word homo mean? What does that mean? Like, why is he looking at me? Why is he being so disdainful? And then I sort of put together that it was the moment that my hands touched the other little boy. And then I knew somehow that that was related to these different feelings.
Yeah.
And so that I was getting negative attention from those feelings, and that I needed to hide them so that other people didn't feel that way about me. I didn't want my parents to know. I didn't want my sister to know, because I didn't know if then they would feel the same way about me that this
Yeah.
counselor did.
I
So,
mean, you also had an experience when you were in kindergarten in
hmm
the bathroom.
yes, I was um, very into playing doctor. Yes.
As you'll
Um,
read in chapter one.
well, that was preschool. That sort of started,
Yeah.
where I was really interested in exploring, what other kids. I've always been like very sexual. Um, so I was very interested in the whole doctor thing with various kids growing up.
Uh-huh.
So,
So when you
and
played
I
with
got
girls, it
caught.
wasn't the same way.
No, no, because all kids do that
Right.
really. When a little girl would want to pull down her underwear, it's like, I would make it really quick. But when it was a little boy, I'd take extra time. Uh, but it was one of those things where I was just curious and interested, and then I got caught in preschool. One of the teachers came in and found me and another little boy in the bathroom, and she pulled me out by my wrists and started shaking me and screaming at me, and of course I didn't really realize that anything wrong had happened.
Yeah.
So, it was sort of there were a number of incidents like that camp counselor, the teacher, that sort of reinforced the fact that whatever this was about me was not good.
Did your parents ever notice anything different about you that maybe now they've said to you, yeah, when you were that age, I just felt something was different but didn't know what it was?
I don't know that also remember you're talking the late 70s, early 80s, and I don't know that it was as conversational, or that my parents just jumped to that conclusion. Um, I mean, it had to have run through their minds by the time I was, you know, 13 or 14, and all the record albums I had were Cher or Madonna or Tina Turner. Um, but
Sounds
you
like
know,
my music collection.
I think my parents felt that they created an environment in which my sister and I could be whoever we wanted, and that they were accepting. And so I think they thought that if I was gay, that I would tell them. Uh, so I don't think they really ever thought beyond that. But also, they weren't aware of the bullying that was going on even through high school, and they didn't realize that I was so tormented and tortured by it.
How come
And
you
that's
kept
why I
that
didn't
to
tell them,
yourself?
because you don't want the people who are really close to you, your parents, your siblings, people who sort of are supposed to love you unconditionally. In a kid's mind, you worry about whether it will affect the way the people who are close to you think about you,
Yeah.
and are they going to not love you or be embarrassed about you? And in high school, I had one friend. Like I said to you, most of my friends were women, and usually adults. Like, I always responded to adults and
It's
not
like
kids.
looking in a mirror right now.
And you know, I remember my parents, they would say, they would comment that every now and then my dad would say something about me not having male friends. And I did have this one friend in high school. and we were friends, and he would come over and we'd watch movies and order in pizza and that kind of thing. But then I started to realize that when we were in school or somewhere in public, he was very deliberate about trying to not be seen with me, which is a horrible thing, you know,
Yeah.
when you're 14 years old or 13 years old and you've already been bullied and teased so much, and then this one person who you think is sort of the kind of friend you're supposed to have, you know, um, is embarrassed of you.
Wow. How'd that make you feel?
Well, you know, you feel completely marginalized and worthless. You know, it's the worst thing for somebody's self-esteem.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I think the idea that anyone could be embarrassed of you or to be seen with you is horrible.
Did you suffer from self-esteem back then, prior to that?
Um, you know, again, like I said, from the age of 6, people started saying things to me. So I would say, yeah, the self is, you know, I think that's sort of a learned thing, self-esteem. I don't think it's an innate thing. So I think when people are telling you that you're not good enough, or you're not good because of this, or you're different because of that, or you're strange, or you're whatever, that definitely can drive your self-esteem right into the ground.
Right.
You know, and especially when it's happening to you so early.
Mm-hmm. But again, the book is talking about like your journey and your experiences. I mean, most people would probably want to know, why have you chose to write this memoir now? Like, what's so significant about this time period?
Well, it just felt to me, you know, I just turned 40, and it felt to me like a new beginning. Like I feel like I have sort of worked through a lot of the things that plagued me growing up, and a lot of the ways that the ways that people treated me manifested itself in various ways while I was going through everything. So, you know, one thing that we didn't mention is that I didn't come out till I was 31, and I was a virgin until I was 31.
Wow.
And a lot of that had to do with the fact that I felt so insecure about myself and felt like it was so wrong that I wasn't ready to tell everyone, even though I was working in Hollywood
Yeah.
and, you know, in an industry where people don't really care, but it had been so ingrained in me from such an early age that it was wrong. And I think at 40, and finally at this point in my life, I'm not saying I have everything figured out, but I have enough of it figured out to say, okay,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
mean,
I got through this, and now I'm sort of ready to go into part 2 of my life in a new way.
when I read that you actually waited till you were 31 before you even kissed a guy,
Yeah.
and then lost your virginity, it's like most people. How did you manage to wait for so long like that? I mean, despite, with the feelings that you had inside. I mean, uh, I guess I want to say, like, a man's a man. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, you know, I also had this sort of meteoric career in Hollywood, and I sort of let that be my cover. You know, it was
Hmm.
very easy. You know, when you're sort of at such a young age and such a high level position, it's sort of it's not abnormal that you'd be working around the clock and so invested in what you're doing. And I just dove into that completely
Yeah.
and just ignored everything else. So I sort of let my career be my cover. You know, the other thing is I had some eating problems earlier on I because of the bullying and that kind of thing. I started to eat because it was something that I could control and it felt good. You
Right.
know, it was where I could get positive feelings. So I would eat, and then I started to gain weight. And then my parents started to become concerned about my weight, and they would say things to me like, "Do you really need that piece of cake?" Or maybe instead of a grilled cheese, you should have an apple. You know, the kinds of things that then you start to feel not. So here I am trying to control things and feel better the best way I know how through the eating, and then I'm getting a hard time from my parents about the eating. And then from there was a subsequent addiction to plastic surgery because I was trying to,
You started at a very young
very
age,
young,
18.
18 was my first surgery.
I got to
And
ask you why.
because I felt like, because my body to me, didn't look good. I felt that it was something that could make me more appealing to other people, at least if I looked better.
Mhm.
And also sort of at that time there was a glamour that came along with having cosmetic surgery. You know, it's something that the rich and famous do.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't as, now everybody just jumps on an operating table, you know, at the drop of a
Yeah,
dime.
they have
At that
drive-through
time,
windows.
yeah, and at that time it was sort of a big deal, and so I felt sort of the residual glamour
Mhm.
and also the looking better would make me attractive to other people. And what I was doing was fixing things on the outside and not working on the things that were really the problem.
And how long did it take you to realize that?
Uh, to be honest, I don't know that I could say until I really sat down to do this book. I don't know that I really would have said it. I would have articulated it that way. I
Mhm.
don't think I realized how I was using it. That it really was a tool. And also to go through elective pain, that much elective pain,
Yeah.
um, for the sake of getting approval from other people is a very dangerous proposition.
Yeah. I mean, can I ask some of the procedures that you've had?
Sure, I've had my nose done. I've had, my chest recontoured 2 or 3 times. Had my love handles done, my stomach. You can't tell right now because I've been eating.
You're so
Book
funny.
tours are great for food and snacks. So yeah, it's just, and yes, you feel a little bit better, but it does not fix the inside.
Mhm.
And you'll see in the book there are a lot of things that I did to get approval. The eating was one thing, um, the plastic surgery was one thing, having celebrity friends was one thing,
Yeah.
um,
Well, you met a
having a
lot of famous icons. I mean, Joan Rivers, Oprah, Dolly Parton. You worked very
yeah,
closely with.
but it just well, I wouldn't say closely. We were together one. It was one small project, but you know it but there were people outside of that group who became personal friends, and sometimes they weren't the best friendships or the best relationships because people who are in the public eye are not really capable of being friends the way you and I could. I mean, it sort of becomes all about them,
Yeah.
and you put up with that because other people think it's cool that those people are in your life,
Right.
and you sort of lose yourself in it. And I realized that I wanted to be valuable. I wanted people to feel that I was valuable for me, not because of my affiliations with somebody else.
Right.
So I was doing all of these things and maintaining relationships that were toxic or not necessarily good for me, again, for the sake of other people approving of me or wanting to be around me.
Instead of approving of yourself, and what
Right.
I mean, I have to ask you. I mean, are you approving of yourself now? Are you happy with your true
Yeah,
self?
I'm happy. I mean, I don't have it all figured out. I mean,
Who
I think,
does?
right, I think anybody who says, comes to a conclusion that I'm getting there, and I'm much more cognizant of certain decisions and not being sucked in by certain kinds of people anymore.
Hmm.
I also have sort of lightened up and given myself a break on how I look a little bit. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And the right person is going to be interested in me because of what I look like now, not because of the potential.
After coming out at 31, I mean, what was your very first relationship like? Like your first long term?
There has been only one. Um, it was, you know, when you, for some reason, I thought that I could fast forward through adolescence. Like I never had that period, that 18 to 25 or whatever it is, where you're sort of experimenting and having fun and sleeping with this one and that one and sort of learning what you like. And that never happened for me.
Mm.
So by the time I was 31 and ready to start dealing with those things, I thought I could just skip over all of it and get right into, setting up a house with somebody. So I met this guy who was lovely, ultimately not the right person for me, but I realized that, again, you can't just fast forward. You
Right.
have to live through it. So I was in a relationship with this gentleman for 5 years, and he was from Australia, and he had visa problems, and he wound up having to marry a woman in order to stay in the country, and he lost his job at one point. I mean, there were so many black clouds over us, and I just kept sticking with it. It's like, well, this is what it's like. This is what a relationship is like. And I didn't realize that it wasn't the relationship for me,
Hmm.
and that I needed to go out there and see what it was like to be with other people and to have a connection to other people. So I sort of had a delayed adolescence.
Yeah. Wow,
if
but
that makes sense.
it does. And you made a joke like you made up for lost time,
I
would you
did.
say?
I definitely did. But you
I'm,
know what? I sort of, look, I don't regret I got a lot in return for the choices I made.
mhm.
I mean, I'm not saying that I would have changed necessarily the way I did things. I mean, would it have been nice to have companionship and somebody who cared about me in a romantic way earlier in my life? Absolutely. But had I done that, I don't know would I have had the career I had? I don't know. Would I have put all my focus on that to the point of being able to move up the food chain in Hollywood? I don't know. I probably would have been pretty distracted.
Yeah,
So, you can't go back. So you learn from it and
yeah. How long did it take you to write the whole book?
I would say it was about a 2-year process, start to
Wow.
finish, in terms of the editing and all of that.
Uh-huh.
hmm
What's your favorite chapter?
The last chapter.
Yeah. Give us a little sneak peek, a little behind the
The
scenes.
last chapter is, um, it's a story about, now the book you can read as one narrative, but you can also read them, they're sort of interconnected vignettes. So if you were to read any specific part, it sort of stands on its own.
Mhm.
Uh, the last chapter is my parents came to, for years they would, when I was little, I wanted to take tap lessons. They wouldn't let me because they were afraid at that time that boys would make fun of me. They didn't realize that was already happening. And so I signed myself up for tap lessons at 40. And so the last chapter is me in tap class and a flashback uh, a few years earlier with my parents where they were out here visiting me and I had to buy some funny birthday cards and I went to the Pleasure Chest, which is a sex store, and I brought my parents with me.
What was
And
that whole experience like?
it's well, that's the funny part. It sounds so outrageous that you'd be in a porn shop with your parents, but it was also at the same time sort of the ultimate acceptance.
Mhm.
It's a silly, funny, like wacky story, but if you really look underneath the surface of that story and see the fact that here are these two people who are the most important people in my life, and finally at 40 years old, there's a comfort. I'm comfortable enough to be myself with them, and they're comfortable enough to be standing there with me, and not only not be embarrassed, but be proud of me. So that's why that chapter is so important to me because I think there are funny moments in that chapter
Mhm.
because the craziness of being in a porn shop with your parents and they're treating you to a porno DVD, like they're buying it for you. So there's the silliness of that, but
Uh-huh.
there's also sort of the poignancy and the acceptance that's underneath that.
Right, because now it's pretty much like in their face also. Like
Right,
it is what it is,
right.
as we said.
So what I like, and also, my parents are very accepting people. We're liberal Jews from the East Coast, and my father's a doctor, and he's a urologist. So a lot of these sex things, and it doesn't faze him. They're very scientific in how they think about things.
Uh-huh.
So it just sort of that chapter just sort of, for me, represents what great parents they are, and sort of where I ended up because of them.
Have they read your book?
Yes, I gave them the manuscript at the same time I sent the final manuscript to my agent because I didn't want anything floating around that they hadn't seen. And when I gave it to them, I said to them, this is purely a courtesy read. I'm not soliciting comments or, you know, restructures or things that you would like to be relayed differently.
Right. But parents always give feedback.
I mean, there was some feedback, but it was interesting. Their concern with the book, a lot of people said, "Can't believe you'd let your parents read, so much about what was going on during the sexual awakening." And to them, that wasn't what really fazed them at all. I think what concerned my parents were the things that were happening during my childhood that they didn't know were happening, and that they weren't aware that they were going on. And I think that was very. I think it really hit them
Yeah.
that I suffered so much as a kid and that they were unaware and didn't, and when I say did nothing to help, not that they wouldn't have, but they didn't know it was happening.
Wow. Amazing. What is life like for you today?
The book has been a really interesting ride.
Yeah.
It sort of made me stop to think about my career. Do I still want to be in entertainment in the way that I was? Not so sure.
You did have a lot of camera time a lot of FaceTime out there. Do you want to talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I did Ricky Lake's the reboot of her talk show, and
Hmm.
I've made appearances on CNN headline news and things like that, and I can't say I don't enjoy it, but I, I sort of like the control that I had with the book. The book to me is more, if I'm going to be public and I'm going to put myself out there, I feel like writing is my, number one. I think I have, as my talents go, I would say that's my strongest,
Hmm.
and I think that I'm more in control of how my story gets told when I do it that way. And also, usually, writing a book doesn't generate um, the kind of notoriety you get with being in front of the camera. I don't know that that's something I'd really love to deal with. So, writing a book can affect people, it can touch people, it can, do all sorts of things for entertain people,
Yeah.
and I can sort of still have my life the way it is.
Awesome.
And the other thing that's been great, sort of a residual effect is the the comments and the letters that I get from people, either younger people who have been struggling with coming out. I've had many people write to me who are also late bloomers in the sex department or in the romance department, who have felt sort of uncomfortable because they waited so long.
Hmm.
And I think they take some comfort in the fact that it's not that uncommon and other people have been through it, and you'll move past it.
Right.
Or letters from people who, I've gotten notes from people who feel like they've, lived through similar things and just were never able to get it out or say it the way they wanted to. So when I get those kinds of things, it makes me feel really good about my choice to
Yeah,
sort of,
because you could kind of be there for them
right,
because it was a different time period. Even when I was growing up, like my family didn't talk of it. We didn't have gay relatives, so I really didn't have anybody I could turn to either. So
well, when did you come out?
I finally came out at 17 to my family, but I had finally admitted to myself at 13, so I kept it a secret for what, almost 5 years, really.
And were you acting on it, or just you knew?
I knew. I kind of acted on. I did have a boyfriend at the time when I
Hmm.
did come out. I mean, he was a lot older than I was.
Hmm.
I'll hand you the mic now.
No.
He was probably in his mid 30s when
Hmm.
I was turning 18, and we
Hmm.
were together. And I thought it was the kind of relationship I wanted. And then as time went on, I learned and blossomed. And like, no, that wasn't a good situation for me. I mean, I know age shouldn't matter in a relationship, but sometimes it does when it's completely two different ages, a huge age range, and his interests are different than mine. It wouldn't work out. It
Right.
didn't work out,
Well, and also,
obviously.
time period, different time periods, like your cultural references and the things that you know about,
Mm,
or that interest you, that the other is sort of lost on the other person because you're not contemporaries.
right.
And that's not to say that relationships that have age differentials can't work. It's just it adds another wrench,
Right. That
you
was the
know.
issue that we
Yeah.
had. I mean, my fiance John now is almost 10 years older than I am,
Hmm.
and we have the best time in everything that we do. He works with me on the show and everything.
Yeah, but I think there comes a point, I think when you're 18
Hmm.
and there's that kind of age
Yeah.
difference, it's one thing. I think after you're 30 or mid 30s,
Your
you've lived
perspectives
enough.
change, exactly.
There's a maturity that's there that's not
Hmm.
there when you're younger. And that's, I think that's a different story than somebody being in their teens and somebody
Right.
being in
Well, I
their
think I was
30s.
also drawn to him because I myself had self-esteem issues growing up. I mean, I was made fun of for other things, for the way I looked, the way I dressed, or whatever. And I think because he showed me attention and that he was interested in me, that's what I. Now I look back and I settled, but back then it was like, oh my God, he's into me and he wants me, and this is a good thing. I'm finally attractive to somebody. So just thinking back to what you were saying earlier, I've been right there with you.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think,
it's sort of a common, I think it's sort of a common thread,
yeah.
among, and also there's so much emphasis on um, things that, like just what we see in the media, and
Hmm.
this is the oldest story in the book, but we see these bodies and these And we all think we have to live up to that to be wanted by somebody else or to be desired by somebody else. And I think it's such a danger,
Yeah,
you know.
I agree with you. Are there plans for a second book?
There are, yes.
Are you currently writing it?
Yes. It's it's sort of it's a novel this time, um, but a really fun, dishy Hollywood novel. It's sort of Truman Capote meets Jacqueline Suzanne meets Jackie Collins.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to have you back when it's all
Yeah,
done, but
I hope
I
so.
will see you plenty of times before that.
Oh, I'm sure you will.
You
I'm
will.
sure you will.
Visit Josh on the web anytime at joshsabarra.com. Also, you can find information on picking up his book there as well. You can also visit me on the web as well, rewatch your favorites, catch up on what you missed, and be sure to follow us both on Twitter. We're on social media. I'm Jason Galka. Thank you as always for joining us. See you next time.